This is A Labour of Love, a podcast about the world of work and civil society, and I am Trenton Elsley. Today I'm talking to Nceba Pupuma, Divisional Head, Corporate Consultants, Old Mutual. We talk about the purpose of retirement funds, the purpose of the coming retirement fund reforms effective 1st of September 2024, and we try and settle on advice for workers. Thanks for joining us, Nceba.
It's a pleasure, Trenton. Looking forward to our discussion today.
Great. Today we're talking about what I believe are called the Revenue Laws Amendment coming into effect on the 1st of September 2024. In simple language, this changes some of the rules for retirement funds, especially as it relates to how and when members can access funds. And today's conversation is intended to be an explainer, trying to make something relatively complicated a little bit simpler to understand. And just to remind you that we're trying to equip worker representatives to be able to explain these changes to others so that they can understand what the change means for them. Another reason we're talking about this is because it applies to about 38% of the workforce, according to the quarterly labour force survey, and that's just over 6 million people who are making some kind of contribution to retirement saving. So to begin, Nceba, I wanted to start right at the beginning and quickly say why we think retirement funds are a good idea in the first place, and then perhaps as you're doing that, to distinguish between some of the terms that seem to be thrown around and are sometimes used interchangeably. So retirement fund, provident fund, preservation fund, and retirement annuity. I think just to touch on how do we distinguish between those, and are there any differences that really matter? So over to you.
Yeah, no, sure, Trenton. So there's various types of retirement funds. Yes, we've had these terms used. You then have occupational retirement funds, or retirement funds where there's an employer and an employee relationship. Those are your provident fund and a pension fund. So in order for you to belong to a pension fund or a provident fund, you must be employed, employer-employee relationship. And then in the course of this employment relationship, people change jobs, they resign. Then there are various options to preserve your benefit when you resign and changing jobs. That's when preservation funds come in. So instead of cashing your benefit when you resign from your job, you have that option of saving your money in a preservation fund. Some people that earn an income without any employer-employee relationship or contract also plan for their retirement by taking a retirement annuity, investing in a retirement annuity. So these are all retirement vehicles. The purpose of all of them is to provide income when you retire, when you don't work. You must have capital that is used to provide income for the rest of your life. So typically, people will belong to these retirement funds, various types of retirement funds, up until 60 or 65. And then from then on, for the rest of their lives, they need to use the capital to earn monthly income. So I hope that clarifies these different types of funds.
Yes, thank you. I think that does it nicely. So in short, retirement savings are meant to provide for you once you stop working, no longer have a regular income, given that for the most part, we're all living longer and longer. It's covering that patch between retirement and the end of life. So let's move on to the changes. So changes are coming, as they say. And perhaps before we get into the nuts and bolts of those changes, can you explain to us what the intention of the changes is? What is it trying to achieve in your mind?
Yeah, two major things. The first is short term. So to allow flexibility, to allow workers, while they are still working, access to a small portion of their retirement savings. That's the first intention or purpose of this new law. And this is reasonable, because in South Africa we see people experiencing financial distress. So there are situations that will put workers in a financial emergency. So they need access to some sort of savings. So the short-term purpose is to provide that flexibility. Instead of workers going to loan sharks and places like that and having to pay exorbitant interest rates just to address financial emergency that they're experiencing. But I think the second purpose is long-term, and it is the most important purpose of this new law. It is to improve the retirement outcomes of South Africans. Currently, research shows that only 6%, around 6% of South Africans will retire comfortable. So in other words, only 6% of workers will be able to maintain their standard of living when they are no longer working and they are in pension. So this is a huge issue, and this issue has been caused by a practice of not preserving retirement savings when people change jobs. So currently, people, when they resign from their employer, they will cash in their retirement savings instead of preserving for later years. So this new law is correcting that, is trying to improve retirement outcomes so that people, at least in retirement, are able to maintain the standard of living by making the bigger portion of your retirement savings preserved, forced preservation until retirement. So those are the two reasons, Trenton, is to allow flexibility, access to address financial emergencies, and also secondly, to correct and to improve retirement outcomes of South Africans by preserving the bigger portion.
Okay, great. So it deals with that tension where, I have a long-term saving, but something happens in my life. Turns out I need money right now.
Right. Yeah.
Previously, my understanding is that I couldn't really access that long-term saving to try and deal with my short-term need. I would have to resign, for instance.
Yeah.
Unlock
and unfortunately, that's what we've seen happening when people were under financial distress and they don't have any savings except in the retirement fund. We've seen workers actually resign and cashing the entire benefit in order to address that financial emergency. Now, with this new law,
to wipe out their long-term saving.
That's it. So with this new law, it provides that flexibility. It gives workers access to just a small portion of their savings to address those financial emergencies.
Okay, great. So, Nceba, let's just run through how things work now, and then we're going to contrast that with how it's going to work after the fact, after the 1st of September. So just run through for us. I mean, you've started to do that. So before 1st of September this year, let us say you had a long-term saving, a retirement fund you were making a contribution to. Exactly under what circumstances could you access that money and how? So I think you started the ball rolling, and you said that you could, if you resigned from your job, you could then access your retirement savings. In an ideal world, you would reinvest all or part of it. You're suggesting that many people don't. What can we say about dismissal and retrenchment, for instance? Is it the same as resigning? If I'm dismissed from my job, do I then get access to my retirement fund? No, this is all pre 1st of September we're staying with. So talk to me about dismissal and retrenchment as compared to resignation.
Yeah. So this new law says that on the 31st of August this year, 2024, the current retirement savings is going to be ring-fenced in a component called the vested component. The rules that apply today, the pension laws that apply today, will continue to apply to that vested component. So the money that you save up until end of August 2024, the rules of accessing that will not change. And after the 1st of August 2024, no new contributions are going to come into this vested component. This vested component, yes, is still part of your fund. It will grow with fund interest until retirement or until you resign, you leave the fund. So let's talk about accessibility of this vested component. So as I said just now, the rules that apply today will not change. So in other words, when workers are dismissed or they resign, they will have access to their money. Yes, subject to tax laws that apply. So there's going to be tax that is paid if a worker wants to take cash out of that fund. So the rules do not change. And that is what we've been saying when we're communicating this new law, this two-pot system law, is that we didn't see a need for workers to panic because the money that they have saved up until the 31st of August is not going to be affected by this new law. How the money is accessed is not going to be affected. So when they resign or when they're dismissed, they're still going to access 100% of the money according to their fund rules. Obviously, tax will be paid. We strongly suggest that when workers access the vested pot or vested component, they do get financial advice. It's always prudent to get financial advice before those big decisions. And we strongly recommend that workers preserve that money, although there is no forced preservation on the vested pot. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, Trent.
Yes, it does. Thank you. So perhaps we can move on to what is changing. So what you just said is that any savings I have, let's say, prior to 1st of September, this is then moved into what's called a vested pot and essentially is untouched. So tell us about what's new there. So there's some continuity there. My current retirement savings go into a vested pot, and then what starts to happen?
Great. 1st of September, no more new contributions will go into your vested component. That vested component will grow with fund investment returns until you leave the fund. There's going to be 2 new pots that are created. The first pot is a retirement pot, and monthly contributions are going to be split into between these 2 pots. So the second pot is the savings pot. So 2/3 of your contributions are going to be allocated in the retirement pot. In that retirement pot, the rule is simple. There's no accessibility there until retirement. And at retirement, you use the balance that is in the retirement pot to buy pension that will last you for the rest of your life. And then 1/3 of your contributions will be allocated in the savings pot. Now, there's a lot in the savings pot, a lot we've seen in the media about the savings pot. There's going to be an opening balance that will be taken from your vested component. So end of August, you have your closing balance. This new law says 10% of your closing balance in the vested component, subject to a maximum of 30%, will be transferred as an opening balance into the savings pot. So we can use an example. If you have 200,000, for argument's sake, in your vested pot end of August, 10%, 20,000 will move to the savings pot as an opening balance. And the monthly contribution that will come from September will then be split, a third into the savings pot, 2/3 into the retirement pot. I'm not sure if I can go on Trenton about the savings pot. There's a lot that I want to unpack about the savings pot. And I think in the industry also some members get themselves confused about many messages that come regarding the savings.
So we're gonna walk through it all, Nceba. So again, I'm just going to keep summarizing as we go. So those who have retirement savings prior to 1st of September, this shifts into what's called a vested pot. And as you pointed out, the rules don't change. Okay, they're as they were. So if you resign or you dismissed or retrenched, you have access to that vested pot, as I understand it.
That's right.
As of 1st of September, as you pointed out, we have these two new pots. So first of all, people who have retirement savings already, they'd be forgiven for thinking that it looks like a 3-pot system, wouldn't they?
Yeah, no,
because now they have vested retirement and a saving.
Yeah, for people currently having retirement provision, definitely it's going to be 3 pots.
Okay, so I think the point for people to understand is that it's 2-pot system for somebody starting fresh now. As of 1st of September, if you have no historical retirement savings, then you don't have that vested portion that's carried through from the past. And so you really do only have 2 pots, the savings and the retirement. So as you said, now we have a savings and retirement, and our monthly contribution is now being split between these two. The majority, 2/3, is going to the retirement pot, and 1/3 is going to the savings pot. And if you had previous savings, you're going to get 10% up to a maximum of 30,000 put into that savings pot to begin with. Perhaps you can start to tell us, so now we have these 2 new pots, savings and retirement. Tell us now about access to these 2 new pots, under what circumstances. So we just talked about resignation, dismissal, and retrenchment. So perhaps revisit those 3 situations and tell us, what do you have access to in the event that you resign, you're dismissed, or retrenched in terms of this new savings pot and this new retirement pot?
Okay, great. I think before I want to differentiate, firstly, Trenton, between provident fund members and pension fund members. In particular, provident fund members who were over 55 years old in March 2021. But that was another big change that happened in March 2021. That's when the annuitization rule came into effect. So if you are a member of the same provident fund that you were a member of in 2021 and you were 55 years or older in 2021, this 2-pot system is not going to automatically apply to you. So this group of workers were in the same provident fund. Now they are about 58 years. They're more than 58 years. They turn 58 in March 2024. They will be given a year from September this year all the way to August, end of August in 2025, to make an option to belong to the 2-pot system. I thought I must make that point before I just unpack the accessibility rules of the savings pot as well as the retirement pot. So the rules, let's start with the retirement pot because the rules are very simple. That pot is not accessible at all until retirement. That is where forced preservation will apply. So 2/3 of the contributions are going to go there, the bigger portion of your monthly contributions from September this year will be allocated in your retirement pot. At resignation or dismissal, that pot is not accessible. It's preserved for retirement. There is a discussion taking place within policy holders in the industry to say that at retrenchment, the policymakers must consider making the retirement pot accessible. But as things stand now, even at retrenchment, the retirement pot is not accessible. So the retirement pot, the simple rule as things stand, is that it will be accessible only when you reach retirement. And at that point, the balance must be used to buy monthly pension. So there's no lump sum that should be payable from the retirement pot.
Right.
When we come to the savings pot, there's quite a few points we need to consider there. Number one, we said that there's going to be 30,000 maximum that will be transferred, 10% of your component as an opening balance. Then workers will start allocating a third of their contribution into this pot, into the savings pot. And they'll also say they can access, in cases of financial emergency, they can access the savings pot once per tax year. Tax year starts from March until February the following year. So they can access it. The minimum amount that they can withdraw from the savings pot is 2,000 Rand. Now, I think this Trenton calls for another explanation or communication with members, because there are members, and I think they are in big numbers, who have or who will have less than 20,000 in their vested component at the end of August. And when you calculate 10% of any amount less than 20,000, it's going to come under 2,000 Rand. So we need to start now managing expectations of workers to say the minimum is 2,000 Rand. If that 10% that was transferred from your vested pot happens to be less than 2,000 Rand, you will have to wait until new contributions come, funding interest come, and this amount is above 2,000. So yeah, they can access it. There's no maximum that can be accessed. It's once per tax year, and the minimum is 2,000 Rand. And another important point is that there will be deductions that will be made when workers claim out of the savings pot. The first one will be the tax. So this amount is going to be taxed at a marginal tax rate. So this is the rate that workers pay at work for their salaries. So SARS will deduct tax based on your marginal tax rate. And if it happens that there are any monies owed to SARS, IT88, that will be settled first before the money out of the savings pot is paid out to the worker. So you have SARS tax deducted, you have any tax liability deducted, and then obviously administrators will also levy some administration fees that will also be deducted. So those are the few rules that we need to keep in mind when we talk about accessibility on the savings pot. We've spoken about the vested component already, that workers can only access it when they resign. They can't access that money while they are still employed.
Yes. Okay, so to recap once again, so the vested pot, which really refers to savings I had already before this change in September, rules stay the same. If I were to resign or be dismissed or retrenched, I could access that. The new pots, the savings and retirement pot, I can't touch until retirement, regardless of what happens. Doesn't matter if I resign or I'm dismissed, I can't touch that. Savings pot doesn't need me to resign or be dismissed or retrenched. I have access to that once a year. The minimum I can draw out is 2,000 Rand. And then understanding, as you said, a few caveats to bear in mind. If you owe the taxman money, they will take that money before they put it into your account, which might be a bit of a surprise for some. And you also point out that if you have 20,000 Rand or less currently as your total retirement savings, you're going to have less than 2,000 Rand seeding your savings pot, which means you won't be able to access it because the minimum is 2,000. Great.
No, great summary. I think I need to add one point, Trenton, on the accessibility there. The law comes into effect on the 1st of September. We need to manage workers' expectations. So when this law comes into effect, the vested component must be created as at August. These 2 new pots must be created and the seeding must happen. So there's administration work and system work that will happen. So we anticipate that a lot of administrators will be ready to do the actual payments maybe towards the end of September or even beginning of October, because we've come across workers saying they're looking forward to claiming effective 1st of September.
Okay, so that's a little warning for workers who think they're going to be able to access money within a week or something of the 1st of September. You're suggesting it would be more realistic to think about early the next month, perhaps October, that you might be able to get access to money if there's money to be accessed.
Correct.
Okay, great. You're starting to hint at some of the cost and benefit of it. We've talked about the benefits, and I guess the benefit is that you have access to a portion of your retirement savings for some people that you didn't have before. You don't need to resign or anything like that to access it. So that's a benefit, I guess. You started hinting at the costs, though, that whenever you're taking money out of retirement savings, which have up until that point not been taxed, once you take it out, you do get taxed. Now, I wanted to ask you, staying with this kind of cost-benefit analysis, I had an underlying question. So is there anything about this restructuring of retirement funds into this two-pot system that undermines the underlying investment capital that you have? Does it lower results over time? So to put my question another way, you're creating the savings pot that you have access to. So this savings pot is more, as they say, liquid. It's available for you to draw money out of it, unlike the rest of your savings, which are essentially long-term savings. Now, the creation of that pot, does that take away from the available investment capital that was operating in your retirement fund? So does it reduce the amount that is actually invested in your retirement fund and trying to make gains for you over time so that when you retire, there is this sum of money you can access? So is this restructuring, is it taking away from the available investment capital that's operating in your retirement savings?
Yeah. So, I get the question. So I think, we've spoken about 3 components. It's 3 components, 1 fund. So the creation of the savings pot is not outside of the fund. The money that is in these all 3 components will continue to earn investment growth until your retirement. Now, I think the question that workers need to ask themselves, when it comes the time and you are facing a financial emergency and you want to claim from the savings pot, that is where then opportunity cost can come into play. Because by withdrawing your money out of the savings pot, you are actually going to lose out on that portion on compound interest. Had you left the money in your fund, the money would have continued being invested in the savings pot just like it is invested in the vested pot and retirement pot until retirement. But if workers access the money early because of financial emergency, then unfortunately they're going to lose out on compound interest on the portion that they access. That is why we strongly suggest and recommend that workers consult a financial advisor, do those calculations and see the impact. And another advice is to consider maybe contributing a little bit more into your fund if you know that you may come and claim from your savings. So to make up on what you're going to lose eventually, you can start to contribute just a little extra every month in terms of additional voluntary contributions. So the money is invested in a lot of funds are actually not changing the investment strategy because this is retirement fund money. It is long-term in nature. But we do understand that there will be few workers that will come and claim. But when they do, we really, really strongly suggest that they get financial advice because it will impact them. Because at retirement, as we just explained, Trenton, a few minutes ago, you will have your retirement pot. At retirement, you can't access that as a lump sum. You must use whatever is in your retirement pot to buy a pension, monthly pension for the rest of your life. So the money that will be left in your savings pot, that is going to be your lump sum. So if you start to withdraw now, you are actually accessing money that would have become available in future. You're actually borrowing from your future. But if you leave that money invested, it grows with fund returns. You have the benefit of compound interest.
Okay, great. So there's two things going on there. You're pointing out that, retirement savings it's money that's working for you in the background for your future.
Yes.
And there's either more money working for you or there's less money working for you. And you point out that if you are withdrawing from your savings pot, well, in a way, you are taking a little bit away from the money that's working for you in the background for your retirement. So you're losing out on interest and gains you will make over the years. But I think importantly, you've pointed out that there's nothing about the restructuring into this two-pot system that actually undermines your retirement savings as a whole. I think you put it very nicely. It's two pots or three pots, but one fund. So no money is leaving your retirement fund. I think that's important for people to know. I do want to come back to what you talked about with what's available when you retire. In fact, maybe let's stay with that right now. So you were telling us now again that this new retirement pot, on retirement, there's no lump sum. There's no cash payment coming from that. It has to be converted into a monthly pension that gives you a regular income each month. You point out that the savings pot will be the cash that you can access. That becomes your lump sum. And so, of course, if you have emptied the savings pot, well, then there will be no lump sum or cash available on retirement. And then just for those who had the vested pot, these were the people with savings prior to 1st of September this year. They, as I understand it, and you can correct me, on retirement, 1/3 of that becomes available as a lump sum, and 2/3 must be converted to a monthly pension. Is that correct?
Correct. And that lump sum from the vested pot, yes, there's going to be tax, but at retirement, it's a friendly tax table that is used. 550,000 is tax-free at retirement. And then on the 2/3 that must be annuitized from the vested pot, vested component. So we take that 2/3 and we add the retirement component. If the sum of the 2/3 vested component and the retirement component is more than 165,000, then you have to buy monthly pension. But if the sum of those two components is less than 165,000, then you can take the amount, the entire amount in cash as well.
Okay, sorry, was that the combination of retirement and vested?
Yes,
or was that
vested?
Oh, right.
So vested 100% must be used to buy an annuity.
All right, so I was wrong. No, 1/3 cash.
No,
Your lump sum.
You're 100% right. You are 100% right, Trenton, in your summary. I was just highlighting the minimum amount that is imposed to annuitize. So we take the 100% of the retirement pot. But if in the retirement pot and the 2/3 of the vested pot, the amount is less than 165,000, then you can get it as cash.
Okay, got it. All right, so there's something for a worker to think about, what they're doing now and what that means later on at retirement. I want to jump back to the process. You started talking about, that a worker shouldn't think that they're going to be able to access this, whatever their savings pot will be. They're certainly not going to be able to access it likely within a week. That you should think about more like a month. We've said that the tax man is going to take any money you owe them from there first. And so that might be a surprise for some. If they are not, if they don't know it, the tax man will claw back money before they transfer it over to them. I wanted to ask you, what do we think fees are going to look like? So the fees administered by funds like Old Mutual and others who are administering these retirement funds, what do we think the fees? So, a worker comes, they make an application to withdraw whatever the amount is. The minimum is 2,000. So let's work with, 2,000 withdrawal, maybe a 10 and a 20. What do we think fees are going to look like? Is it going to be a flat rate? Is it going to be some kind of sliding scale? And do we have an idea of the quantum? How much?
Yeah, I've seen comments from the Institute of Retirement Funds in South Africa saying that these fees range from 300 Rand to 600 Rand. So some administrators apply a percentage of the amount, of the actual amount that is being withdrawn, and they impose that as a fee. Some are going to charge a flat rate. I think maybe there is merit to consider both, but a flat rate may make sense more because the same amount of work will be done to handle that withdrawal. You still have to apply for a tax directive from SARS. You still have to apply to verify bank details and do all the other checks that you do for any benefit. So I think there might be a merit in having a simple flat fee. So it's in that range, Trenton, between maybe 300 to 600 Rand.
600. Well, that's going to be interesting, I think. And I think we can expect some noise around that from trade unions and others. I think we can all appreciate that for somebody withdrawing, say, 2,000 Rand, and this is a meaningful amount to them, it maybe sorts out some kind of problem in their life. And if they're getting charged something like 600 Rand to withdraw that 2,000 Rand, that's a really big hit for them and likely to produce much unhappiness. So that's going to be an interesting space to watch.
No, most definitely.
I would like to see some kind of protection of, people in that bracket.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think also the fact that SARS will levy the marginal tax rate. We need to communicate that to workers. And workers also need to know that if they owe SARS any tax liability, SARS will recoup that money from this savings pot. And most importantly, the admin fees that are going to be charged. Like I say, the various providers charge fees on different bases. But the engagement now with workers is critical. Communication, so that people can be aware of the charges. And so I can speak for my own employer that we have released a calculator where workers can start to see how much tax estimated can be charged by SARS and all these fees, so that they manage their expectations now ahead of time. But I know also that for administrators, many administrators, this change is big. So they needed to change the system, because it's not only about the withdrawals from the savings pot. It changes fundamentally everything that we've known before. So administrators had to change their systems. They invested a lot in changing the system. So, but like you say, it's going to be a very interesting discussion with members going forward.
Yeah. Okay, so let's quickly summarize the possible sources of disappointment for a worker who is trying to make a withdrawal from their savings pot. The first is just perhaps that they didn't have enough in their retirement fund by the 1st of September, and so their savings pot is in fact not big enough to make the minimum withdrawal of 2,000. Another possibility is that they owe SARS, they have a tax liability with SARS, in which case SARS will deduct those monies, and whatever's left, if anything is left, would then be transferred to the worker. Another source of disappointment might be the fees levied by the fund administrator. You've talked about a range of between 300 and 600 Rand, which would also reduce that amount. And then the last piece of the puzzle is it's taxed. And you say, you use this term marginal tax rate. I'm not sure how much that means to a lot of ordinary people. Would it be fair to say that the marginal tax rate is really, it's not a good rate for an individual, as opposed to the rate that is applied if you preserve those funds? As you pointed out, it's a gentler tax regime. If your money is preserved in a retirement fund and you're only accessing it upon retirement, essentially you are taxed less. And as soon as you're drawing money earlier, you're taxed more. Or is that a fair explanation?
That's a fair summary, Trenton. And also, the principle of the marginal tax rate is that the more you earn, the more tax you're going to pay. So,
right,
people, workers that earn less than 19,000, I think their marginal tax rate is 18%. And when you start to earn above that bracket, you move into the following bracket. If you earn more than 20,000, more than, I think, 19,800, then you move into another bracket. Then the marginal tax rate is 26%. So that's another thing that we need to...
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's another thing we need to include in our communication, that by accessing the savings pot, you're going to be taxed when your marginal tax rate, but also your annual income will include the amount of money you claim from the savings pot, which could possibly get you into a higher tax bracket. That's a possibility that workers need to keep in mind, especially workers that earn more.
Okay, I think that's a good point too. So workers need to be conscious that as far as the taxman is concerned, any money you get from your savings is just extra income. And if you are close to a tax bracket threshold, it's possible that it pushes you into the next tax bracket and that you get taxed more and then are surprised when you're getting less money out. And it's because your tax increased. So folks need to try and be aware if withdrawing from the savings pot is going to push them into another tax bracket.
Yeah. And I think,
cool.
I think another point, Trenton, that we need to keep in mind so that people are not disappointed is the Provident Fund members. And remember that group that is getting closer to retirement now, those workers who belong to the same Provident Fund, and they were 55 years in March 2021. They're now around 58 years. So they're not going to be automatically included. So we don't want those workers to think that automatically they can also access the savings pot. There must be an engagement with them. They have to elect, and they are given 12 months to submit their elections so that they can be part of the two pots. If that communication does not reach them, you could find frustration in the system. And we say, for example, this worker decides to exercise his option in February next year and say he's still within the 12 months. I want to belong to the two-pot system. Then the seating is going to be worked out on the month the election came. So you elected in February. The vested component is going to be the end of February, and the seating will happen at that time.
Okay, great. I think that's a really good point, because you told us earlier on that if you're about 58 years old now, you don't have to become part of the new two-pot system.
You are automatically excluded.
Yes. There's this added point, though, that it's not automatic. So, in fact, you will not be part of the system unless you actually elect to, which means that you have to stipulate. So there's an action you have to take. Otherwise, there won't be any savings pot. Can you give us a sense, how does an ordinary worker initiate that? If they've decided that they do want to be part of the new system, who do they speak to? Is it through the employer? Must they speak to their employer? Do they have to reach out directly to the fund? How does it work?
Yeah. So let's just qualify that again. It's Provident Fund members.
Right.
Who were members of the same fund in 2021. So they didn't change funds. And they were 5 years old in March 20, when the rules changed there. So these are workers that had the vested right when they retire to get their entire benefit from a Provident Fund in cash. So that was the difference. That was the big change that came in March 2021. So when that change came in March 2021, it did not affect workers who were 55 years and older. So this is just the group of workers in the Provident Fund, not pension fund, in the Provident Fund, who are still in the same Provident Fund. So the process, they have to talk to the employer and their fund. So the funds, I know they are communicating with this group of workers. It has to be included in the communication to members that you need to exercise the option. Some providers are using it electronically. You have to click the button and say, I want in, or you'll be out. Some are doing it by nomination, like a claim form, option form that they complete and submit to HR.
Okay. But if they're not approached with anything, then they should be speaking to their employer to make that choice. Understanding that if they don't do anything, the situation will be that they are not included. And what if that period of a year elapses and there's been no action by anyone? No stipulation has been made within that year. Do they then stay outside the system?
Yeah, they will continue out of the system, and now it will be permanent. There won't be any option for them. Yeah.
Okay. Nceba, one of our last things, as a financial services advisor of sorts. I mean, I have a sense that if you're accessing your savings pot, forgive me, to deal with some kind of financial distress in your life, what can we say are better bets and good bets? Now, we've talked about how there is a kind of cost attached to accessing the savings pot. You're getting taxed, there's fees and the like. But, what would you consider better things and worse things to use that money for? So let me throw out two examples and then perhaps you can color in the picture. So, one might be, I have taken out a loan somewhere on, let's say, quite bad terms for me, with a very high interest rate, and the pressure's building, and I'm not servicing that loan properly, and perhaps the interest rate and the penalties are escalating, or there's some other kind of pressure coming to bear. Would that be a good thing to use that savings pot money for, to try and settle that loan and close it down? That's one example. Another might be, maybe there's a worker in a household who really just are struggling to make ends meet. And maybe there's, literally some groceries and a set of school fees that need paying now. And that's what they're going to use it for. Which of those, I'm just trying to give you examples to think about, like, what are better things and worse things to use the savings pot money for? What's the most effective way to use it? Understanding, of course, that people are free to use it however they wish, but just that sometimes there are more productive and less productive ways of using money like this. How would you react to that?
So it's interesting to read the results of the surveys that were done recently. We sent out surveys to various workers, various salary bands, and asked them, about the two pots. What would they use the money for? The overwhelming majority of them said that they will use the money to settle debt. I think your first example is debt that is not issued in favorable terms, and now it's even oppressing the worker. So the overwhelming majority of them cited that. Quite a number of workers cited school fees, home renovations, and things like that. We know also that the cost of living is putting pressure to workers. We can just talk recently about the increase in the electricity price. It's putting pressure on households. The Old Mutual released a survey called the Investment and Savings Monitor. They release this every year. And there it showed that 37% of working South Africans are under financial distress. Various reasons. Not only the two examples that you have counted, Trenton. So that is why many funds are not going to define what is an emergency, what is a good reason to come and claim from the savings pot. But what we strongly advise is that when workers have that legitimate reason and they are under financial distress, before they withdraw, they must have financial advice. It's good to sit with the financial advisor so that they show you the impact of your decision, so that when you take that decision, at least you know the consequences. So we can't really say these are the critical things that may qualify for claims, because 37% of people under financial distress is quite a number of workers that need this relief.
So yes, I think what you're pointing to is the fact that I think the industry is expecting an avalanche of claims after the 1st of September because so many workers and so many households are under pressure. Now, you're saying the right thing. Oh, you should talk to a financial advisor. But I'm just wondering, I'm a machinist at a clothing factory somewhere in Cape Town. I'm not sure that I feel like I have access to a financial advisor. What what can a worker do, or perhaps a trade union, as a representative of a group of workers? How can they make that link? Let's just say that it's not a perfect world, and financial advisors are not just strolling around to chat to whenever you need it. What plans can be made to try and make that connection so that people do get proper advice and have a better understanding of what they're doing when they do it? Should trade unions be prompting this with employers? You need to get advisors from the funds out to the workplaces to talk to workers. What do you think should be done to make sure there's more?
Absolutely. Trade unions should be talking to employers and asking for advisors to be made available. And about 2018, if you recall, there was a change in the law, in regulations in South Africa, and we call those default regulations. Part of that was a compulsory requirement to make available retirement benefit counselors. Each fund, by law, must have available retirement benefit counselors. The role of these retirement benefit counselors, when people join the fund, is to take time to explain the benefits to them. And when they leave the fund due to resignation or retirement, explain in simple terms the options available to them. The same retirement benefit counselors, I think, should fill this role, should engage with the trade unions, with the members, so that when people want to claim from the savings pot, they get this information and advice from the financial advisors, but also get the information from retirement benefit counselors.
All right. That's great. Nceba, thank you so much for your time and helping us understand the ins and outs of the coming law changes. A big thank you. And perhaps as a last note, so I'm a worker, I want to make a claim under the new laws. Do I also initiate that with my employer directly, who then communicates with the fund? Is that the standard procedure, or is there something else?
Yeah, it differs from provider to provider. I know some companies, the workers will be engaging directly with the funds. A lot of administrators have digital platforms where the administrator will submit the claim, the worker will submit the claim online, and then all the test applications, verifications are done online, and then the payment is made online. So the administrators are communicating. So this is another point that must be communicated to workers to make them ready for claiming. So it differs from funds to funds. Other funds will be using claim forms, and they will be submitting straight to the administrator or via the employer. But the point is that each fund will communicate the claim process.
All right. So it does seem like there might be another role for trade unions to play there in facilitating some of these processes where workers, they're just not that close. And maybe going online and figuring these things out might be quite challenging for some. And I think perhaps trade unions can play a role facilitating that. So,
absolutely.
Nceba, thank you again. Forgive me, I thanked you and then I asked you another question. But this time, really, I'm just thanking you for your time, helping us understand. It was great to have you on the show. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Trent. Good to chat.